Okay, excellent. So we've got over 124 people joining us today, so that's fantastic. Welcome. My name is Louise Ayers. I'm Head of Programme Support at the school, and we are here today to give you further information about your forthcoming IACC, which is happening in the next 2 to 3 weeks. I would say at the outset that we are hopefully not sharing anything with you today that is new information. This is all information that we have shared previously is on the website, but we think it's really valuable to take some time to just walk you through the information and to make sure that you understand and have the opportunity to ask us questions about the assessment. So as I said, my name is Louise Ayers, I'm Head of Programme Support. We are recording the session today, so we will be able to do that, and so it will be available to other colleagues if they're not able to join us today. I'm just going to take you through the agenda for today. So we have up to 2 hours today, but we don't necessarily need to take that time. It will very much depend on how many questions everybody has for us today. We're going to take you through a presentation firstly, and my colleague Nicky Riley, who is our Assessment Operations Manager, you can see on screen, is going to just walk you through the IACC. And we're going to talk about different aspects of the IACC, including the purpose and framework, how the assessment is marked, how you can prepare for the assessment and the format that you can expect on the day, and the support that will be available, so that's support through the school, when we anticipate results will be available for you, and how we're going to manage feedback. Also, just talk a little bit about the resits, which hopefully the majority of you will not require, but they are going to be available, and any appeals process. And we do have some assessment policies that are associated with the assessment, so we just want to make sure that you are aware of those and understand how they apply and when they are applied. And then towards the end, we've got just a few dates to make sure that you're aware of that apply to the assessment. And then we will have a period of question and answer. So we have at the moment set up the webinar, so the chat is not enabled and we can't currently see you, but it's great that you're here to join us. And we will open up Slido towards the end. So do make sure that you've got your phone or access to your computer so that you can join us. When we get to the questions, we will ask you to upvote any questions that you feel you really want to know the answer to. We will obviously try to answer as many questions as we can today for you. In the event that there are questions that we can't answer, we can take those away. And we do also have a further drop-in session that you can join next week, which we will give you further information for shortly. So that's what we're going to cover. So I'm just going to hand over to Nicky, who's going to take you through the details of the assessment.
Thanks, Louise. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this briefing. I'm Nicky Riley. I'm the Assessment Operations Manager, and I'll just briefly talk through these slides. As Louise already said, there shouldn't be anything here that you're not already aware of and hasn't been available to you through other resources within the school up till now. There is questions at the end, but also we'll record this and upload it onto our school website. So if there's anything that you think you didn't quite have time to cover, you can go back and review it later at your own time. So let's talk about the STP final assessment. This is an independent assessment to determine the readiness to practice as a safe threshold entry-level clinical scientist. It's an individual assessment, and we allow for the impact of COVID on learning opportunities and experiences. This variability within it and the individuality is the fact that we cover up to 31 specialties, and we realise that everybody may have had a different journey through the programme and may have been impacted in different ways by COVID or the availability of resources within your learning environment. So hence the individuality of the training experience. The assessment is not standardised, so we don't assume equity of experience. As I've just said, we realise you've all had a separate journey, but what we do aim to do is make sure that everybody undertaking the final STP assessment is ready and safe to practice. Thanks, Louise. Sorry, I'm going to be doing a Chris Whitty and saying next slide, please. The IACC is based around the framework from the Academy of Healthcare Science of Good Scientific Practice, And there's a link to that on the school website. And within that practice, we work on the 5 domains, and all of these will be covered within your interview. Domain 1 is your professional practice. So this is your opportunity to talk about your patient-centered care, to talk about your scope of practice and the professional responsibilities that you've encountered throughout your programme. Domain 2 is your scientific practice. This is your technical proficiency within your chosen area and about how you would quality assure your scientific practice day to day. Domain 3 is your clinical practice. This is your opportunity to talk about your clinical activity, your investigations and the therapeutics you may have had an opportunity to experience. And domain 4 is research, development and innovation. So research activities and service development that you've been involved with. Domain 5 is clinical leadership. And that's your chance to talk about how you develop self and lead others within your workplace. All of these are available through the link at the bottom. So the purpose of the IACC is to demonstrate even further that you're ready to register with the HCPC and to go on to practice as a clinical scientist. Trainees and assessors need the confidence that the trainee has the ability to work within their scope, that you're self-aware, that you self-regulate, and that you continue to self-develop. And this is your opportunity to show that you're able to uphold those professional standards that you've been exposed to throughout your programme. So the IACC was to develop multidisciplinary to meet HCPC requirements and to provide a purposeful exit assessment. And in order to do that, you've devised your critical reflective narrative, which should have been submitted by 12 o'clock yesterday. And following on from that, there will be an interview, which you will have semi-structured questioning from your panel, and you will then have 2 unseen CPD scenarios. The marking criteria for this IACC is just pass-fail. And in order to pass, you must satisfy each of the domains that were specified and detailed on the earlier slide. A global statement, which is your final summation at the end of your interview. And there are 2 readiness to practice criteria. One that demonstrates your ability to recognise the scope of your incompetence and to self-regulate. And 2 demonstrates the ability to ensure professional standards and safety are maintained at all times. Those RPs 1 and 2 are themes that should run throughout the IACC interview, and there's an opportunity under every domain for you to cover those aspects of your practice. The marking criteria is critical evaluation, the use of evidence, analysis, self-practice, and continual professional development. And through those areas, that's your opportunity to show your confidence, your competence, and your safeness practice. So how's the interview happen? The interview itself will be virtual through MS Teams, and now that the narrative deadline has passed, within the next 24 to 48 hours, you'll receive an individual invite to your interview. So please keep an eye on your inbox. They are going out as we speak, but as it's a lot of you to coordinate, it takes about 48 hours to process. Within your panel, there'll be up to 3 assessors. 3 is the maximum, and your interview will last for 60 minutes. Within that 60 minutes, your panel will have 45 minutes to question you on the critical reflection, and then another 15 to cover 2 unseen CBDs. It's important at this point to say that those are allocated times. That's not a cut-off time, as in your 45 minutes are up, we'll now move on to CBDs. It's up to your panel and the lead assessor to agree the structure of that hour. And it may be that your CBDs appear in the middle or at the beginning, but your lead assessor will talk you through the construct at the beginning of your assessment. 10% of the IACC interviews will be observed. That's a quality assurance process, and we have external service users and senior school members that may come in. The allocation of these is random, and the person observing you will not appear on your screen, so will not distract from your interview and will not intervene at any point. So before you go into Teams, we ask, please test your internet connection. Please make sure that you've got good bandwidth, that you're in a quiet area, that you've got the ability to focus on what you're going to be saying, and that you've got appropriate headphones, anything you might need for the day, but please ensure that that's all in place before the IAC. You need to arrive at your allocated time, and please don't attend early. You may interrupt the assessment before you, and that may result in your interview having to be rearranged. You need to have an accepted ID document, something with a photograph on it, so a passport or a driving license, that you can present to the lead assessor at the beginning of your interview, and that you've read the assessment regulations that are detailed on the school website. We ask that you dress appropriately for the professional conduct of the interview, and we will make sure that you're alone and unaided wherever you may be, and that you have no other materials open on your computer before the interview begins. So we've given 10 minutes time-wise for the pre-assessment checks, your ID, making sure you're safe and secure and that you have nothing open. After the checks have been completed, your lead assessor will introduce the rest of the panel members to you and will introduce the structure and the outline of the assessment. The lead assessor is also responsible for ensuring the timing of your assessment and may at times give you a reminder when going through of how long is left. If you have requested and had approved a reasonable adjustment for your interview, your panel would have been fully briefed on that beforehand, and they will be able to confirm those details with you. When you finish your interview, if you finish outside of your allotted time, we advise that you stay there with the panel. They sometimes like to interact, they sometimes like to question you further. And there may be things that you want to add or inquire about. But if you leave the assessment room early, you cannot re-enter. You do not then have the opportunity to add to your interview. So as I've said before, full panel will be up to 3, 1 lead assessor. And exceptionally, there may be the necessity to record your interview, which could then be available for further assessment later outside of the actual IAC period. Any conflicts of interest between trainees and trainee officers have already been managed by the school. The assessors have declared to us any potential conflicts of interest, and the panels have been mapped according to those. I think it's important to point out at the moment, though, you may enter an assessment room and there may be somebody familiar to you. There may be somebody you recognise, especially within a small specialty. This does not mean that there is a conflict of interest. It's important to note that everybody in that assessment room is acting under a professional code of conduct and have been trained to participate in this assessment, and so objectivity is key. It's also really important that we highlight at the moment that anything happening within that assessment room is confidential. So what are you going to say in your interview for 60 minutes? Well, the interview allows the panel to explore aspects of the critical narrative that you've submitted to confirm that you're ready to practice for each of the domains that we've previously discussed and for the global statement, your summary. This really is your opportunity to elaborate and go into detail about how you meet those domains. It's semi-structured. The panel would have already agreed the questioning for each domain, but they may wish to take that further. They may wish to submit some follow-up questions, or they may ask you to elaborate further or give further examples. Please don't interpret that in any way. That's just how that panel have agreed they want to pursue the domains of the IAC. But it's very much your opportunity to demonstrate your readiness for becoming registered with HCPC. Space discussions. So as I already said, you'll see 2 unseen. They will be shared with you on your screen. So your lead assessor will then upload the CBD and you'll be able to be given time to read and assimilate what's in front of you before they begin questioning you. We roughly allocate 5 to 7 minutes of the IAC for each CBD, but as previously stated, that might not necessarily be at the end, and they might feel that one CBD takes less time than the other. So it's very much at the will of the panel as to how long they want to spend on them. Again, these have been written by specialty leads and are mapped against the domains. Interview support. So the actual panels will be allocated a professional trained coordinator for every day of the IAC. And those coordinators can be contacted at all times. So should anything happen during your interview, so your internet freezes or suddenly one of your assessor drops off, the panel have instant access to the coordinator, who then has the ability to try and come in and resolve those issues. The time will be stopped. You will not be penalised time-wise. And again, the lead assessor in negotiation with that coordinator will be able to ensure that you've had your adequate assessment time. There's also a team of senior school staff that are available where issues can be escalated. And we also proactively address any issues that may have been raised from previous interviews so that they don't go on to jeopardise others. Your interview might be randomly selected to be observed, as stated before, and again, you will not be interrupted and you will not be distracted by them being there. And we will, if necessary, record your interview, but those recordings are held securely within the school. They are not shared. And they will be destroyed 20 days after the IAC assessment concludes, which then coincides with the end of any of the appeal windows that may occur. So this year we've slightly changed how we administer the IAC, and we've done that really to reduce the complexity and the opportunity for any technical errors that have been experienced in the past. We used to operate with people moving between rooms, but we've eliminated that risk, and everybody is now going into one room. All of your assessors will have been present at 9 o'clock in the morning and would have undergone a technical test, received any updates or any advice on what needs to be implemented, and aware of any reasonable adjustments or support arrangements that are needed for that day. We're hoping by having the briefing that eliminates the risk of the technical aspects of things for your assessors going wrong. As we've said, support staff will be available at all times. We have a Teams chat, we have phone calls, and we have emails. And following the morning briefings, the assessors will go straight into the assessment room and they will stay in that room all day. So once that link is open, we know we've got the reliable access to that interview room that can be maintained. So you've survived the IAC, you've got through your interview. Let's talk about the results. There's a lot of processes that go on behind the scenes once the information from the IAC is submitted, and a lot of quality assurance needs to take place to make sure that the feedback and the results are not only confirmed, but are constructive as well. So we collate all of the feedback and then we liaise further with the panel to ensure that the feedback and the results captured reflect exactly the experience of the interview. Those then go to an exam board to be considered, and recommendations are made to the ratification board. The ratification board then finally approve or disapprove the results, and this is a place where we may have to discuss any incidents or matters that have occurred during the IAC. The key dates you need to know are that we intend to get the results out to everybody the week commencing Monday the 5th of August. We will not send you your results on the Friday. We will aim to get them out before that. But as just stated, there are a lot of quality assurance processes that need to take place. We appreciate how eager you are to receive your results, but we will be working as hard as possible behind the scenes to get them to you as quickly and as accurately as possible. Once you've received your results, once they've been ratified, if they are not as had hoped, there may be grounds for an appeal, not based just on the result, but based on the process and the conduct of the assessment. There is an academic appeal policy on the website and a link will follow. There is very strict criteria of what qualifies or doesn't qualify for an appeal, but that can be read in your own time through the link on the internet. Let's hope nobody needs those links. As stated below, academic appeals can be made the week commencing Monday the 19th and must be done within 10 working days of the results being emailed to you. Resits. So every trainee is allowed 3 attempts at the STP final assessment. And if you receive a fail outcome, we automatically will assume that you will re-enter for the next assessment. So that would be winter 2024 after this sitting, which is taking place the beginning of November. I just want to confirm here, though, you may be aware that we are planning to implement a new assessment for 2025. However, we will still be running IACCs. Anybody who started the course under the old curriculum and has sat an IACC will continue to be assessed under the regulations and the terms that they begun the programme. So there are 3 attempts. If you do have a resit, there may well be what we call a light resit, where we don't have to assess you on the whole interview, but that can be, the information for that can be shared at a later date, and again, is available on the web. Thanks, Louise. So these are the main policies available through the school website. We have the academic appeals, reasonable adjustments policy. Mitigating circumstances policy is particularly prevalent for anything that may have unexpectedly impacted on you during the time of the assessment. So unfortunate circumstances do happen for people during the 2 weeks of the IACC, and it may be that the mitigating circumstances policy applies, and there is a complaints policy at the end as well. Key dates are that the interviews are between the 1st and the 12th of July, and as previously stated, within the next 48 hours, you should get your individual invite for your interview time. The results we intend to send out the week of Monday, the 5th of August, and the deadline for appeals is the 19th of August. Following this presentation and question session, if it's been a lot to take in and there's a lot to think about, so we're planning to run another drop-in next week on the 19th between 12 and 1. So if there are any further questions or anything else you want to pursue with us, people from the school will be available during that time. And that's the end of the talk. So now we're going to go over to Slido and our colleague Stuart, where it's your opportunity to submit some questions that we are hoping we'll be able to answer for you.
Thank you, Nicky, and thank you for taking us through the detail of the IACC. Hopefully you found that really useful. As we said, we're hoping there were no surprises in there, and that most of the things that we've just advised you of were things you were already aware of. But what we're going to do now is we'll just spend some time answering some of your questions, or as we've said, if there are questions we don't feel we can answer today, then we will take those away and look at setting up some FAQs, or certainly come back to the drop-in session next week and we should have an answer for you by then. Okay, so Nicky, I am going to aim some of these, or the majority of these, at you, but we do have other colleagues from assessment on the call should we need their input. So can we use paper and pen during the interviews?
No, I'm afraid not. No, you can't. If you felt there was the need to have required a pen and paper, that would have to have been a request for a reasonable adjustment, for which unfortunately the deadline has already passed.
Thank you. Right, so I can understand why people are asking the question, but try and think positively, everybody. So what percentage of trainees normally fail?
We normally have a failure rate of around about 10 to 15%. Okay. But again, let's not focus on that. Yeah. That means that we normally have a success rate of 90%. So yeah. Let's look positively.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So if you fail, I'm just taking these from the top. So if you fail one CBD, do you fail the whole IAC and need to resit all domains?
No, not if you fail a CBD. You have to have passed, if you look at the criteria, you have to have passed all of the domains, and you have to have passed your global statement, and you have to have passed RP1 and RP2. If you fail one CBD, the exam board will be aware of that, but that does not result in a fail.
Okay. Thank you, Nikki. So just jumping to the one that says similar, yeah. Do you need to pass both CBDs to pass the IAC?
Yeah, no. It's the criteria is the domains, the global statement, and RP1 and 2. The CBDs are very much an opportunity for the panel to give you the opportunity to combine all of your knowledge from the 5 domains and covering RP1 and 2. It's a chance for you to show how you will actually apply that understanding and how you would actually transfer that knowledge to a real life situation. So it really is a chance for you to bring everything together in one cohesive explanation in response to a CBD.
Okay. Thank you, Nikki. Okay, so are we questioned on things only included on the narrative?
I would say the narrative is there to guide people, to guide the panel, how to direct your questioning. So it is based around the content of your narrative. What you may find is that, for example, they may question you about a competency that you've not had the opportunity to experience, that has not been part of your STP program journey. What that will give you, though, is the opportunity to then explain how does that fit with your scope of practice? How would you deal with that limitation? How would you address that once you'd been registered? So none of the questions are trick questions. They are all just there to emphasize the safety and your readiness to practice. But the foundation for your interview is the competencies and the reflection of your narrative.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. So how many questions are asked per GSP?
It's individual to the panel. They roughly work out timing wise. You've got 45 minutes to cover 5 domains. They will potentially ask 2 or 3 main questions. They might probe further, or you might, for some panels, find that they only feel there's one question that they want to present. It really is up to the panel to manage that time.
Okay, thank you. And obviously the panel's intent will be to, get the most out of you whilst you're there.
Absolutely, so. Absolutely. It really is about providing you the opportunity to excel and to demonstrate your experience.
Okay, can you have a copy of your critical reflection with you during the assessment?
No, you cannot. You cannot have any additional materials in the room, and you cannot have anything open. So no books, nothing else on your screen.
Okay, thank you. And can we discuss pieces of work that are not on one file during the 45 minutes of questions?
If you can draw on an experience, if you can support that with your experience, if it's pertinent and relevant, you can refer to it. It may not be actually a solid competency. It may just be an experience of how you applied leadership or how you showed a limit to your scope of practice. But if it's something that can be evidenced, you can include it in your interview.
Thanks. Okay, if we have cited competencies that are not yet signed off, is there a cut-off time for them to be signed off on one file prior to interviews?
We would hope that by the time you go into your interview, those cited competencies have been signed. It may be that your panel refer to it. If there's a reason why they've not been signed off, your training officer's been on leave, or there's been an interruption to your training, there's an opportunity for you to explain that. But it really is based around your narrative.
Okay. Okay, so if you pass the interview but fail the narrative, how would the resit look, or vice versa?
So you cannot pass or fail the narrative. The narrative is the foundation and is the information provided in advance to launch your interview. So the questioning for your interview in the IAC is based around your narrative. It's not marked as a separate piece of work. It's integral to the whole assessment.
Okay, thank you, Nicky. That's very clear. So fairly open question here. So what did previous students fail on? And is that information we can share?
Wow. I was going to say, I don't think they've consented for us to share that. I would say no one thing. I would say that everybody's journey is different, and I wouldn't want to presume that there is something that people have to be more aware of. It's really about a rounded demonstration of your own personal journey through the programme and showing your own readiness to practice. It would be too individual to say what people fail on.
Okay, Nicky, I'll give you a rest and take the next question.
Oh, you can do that one. Yeah, go on, Louise.
Okay, so what happens with our employment if we need to retake? So the STP is funded, and you are funded to train for 3 years. And within that timeline, you have one first attempt at the final assessment, which obviously generally for most trainees occurs in the summer of their final year. For those trainees who've gone through exceptional extenuating circumstances, they may have an extension which facilitates a resit if that's necessary. But normally you won't have your contract extended on the basis of exam failure alone. There have to be extenuating circumstances that affected your ability to engage with either that assessment or broader elements of the training, either due to personal reasons or for reasons that are outside of your control. The policy around exceptional extenuating circumstances is on the school website. If you are thinking about making an application, there's a panel that meets on a monthly basis, usually the first Wednesday of every month. 2 weeks prior to that meeting, you need to have submitted your application, and that needs to come with all the relevant evidence. So that information is available, and we can make sure that that link is recirculated if you need it. But essentially, you won't have your employment extended if you fail the IAC unless you've got exceptional extenuating circumstances. Okay, back to you, Nicky. So can the unseen CBD questions be related to a year 1 rotation and not the trainee specialism?
Louise, can you help me with that one? Because that changed, didn't it? I think that's what
I think this relates to,
I
think it was on one of the slides that we went through. So this relates to the completion criteria. So if there is a question related to the rotations, we're expecting it to be related to the rotation associated with your specialist training. And that's because that fits with the completion criteria for your cohort. So our completion criteria have been adjusted year on year, depending on the level of impact of COVID. So your group are the final year where there is an adjustment in place, and we are going back to normal from 2025. So yeah, we are expecting it could be a rotation, but if it is a rotation, then it should be associated with your specialism rather than one of the other rotations you may have completed in your first year.
They change all the time.
Okay. Is there a percentage of signed off competencies we should be aiming for before the interview? Will this be considered?
We have an unofficial threshold of 80%. However, the entry to the IAC is independent of the numbers signed off. That is a completion issue. It is the way to approach it is that the more competencies you have completed and are signed off, the more competent you will appear, and the more experience you have to call on during your interview. But we roughly say, in order to be fully prepared for the IAC interview, you should aim to have 80% of your competencies signed off.
Okay. Right, so a logistical question now. So the 10 minutes pre-interview are before the 60 minutes, so I need to join 10 minutes before.
No, you need to click on the link at the time stated in your invitation. The time for your pre-interview checks has been written into the timetable, and the assessor is aware that when you join the room, that is your pre-interview check time. They will then manage internally when the interview starts, and they may well introduce themselves, talk you through the structure of how they're going to proceed, but they will then inform you when the time of the interview begins.
Okay, thank you, Nicky. Okay, I think we've covered this, but
Yeah, we have.
do you need to pass both CBDs to pass the IAC?
No.
No. Okay, thank you.
No.
Okay, will there be any knowledge specific questions?
Again, that's really difficult to answer. It is, I can reiterate again, it depends what you have placed in your reflective narrative. That is the absolute foundation for what you will be questioned on. So again, it's so different for every specialty. That's hard to say and difficult for every panel. If you go back and look at the criteria under every domain on the slides we have shared, those are the foundations for the questioning of your interview.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
if you fail the winter IAC, will we have to wait until summer for a resit?
That's actually not very easy to answer. At the moment, we have withdrawn our spring sitting. We have massive resource implications for running a spring sitting, but this year we did run an exceptional sitting. I think we will need to look at individual trainees' circumstances, the failure rate, and then we will confirm what we are laying on for people. What we will do is we will try our hardest to get as many people signed off and into the workforce as soon as possible, whilst weighing up how much additional time you may need to gain more experience to then be successful at the IAC. I feel that was a very political answer.
That's fine. Okay, so will the panel make it clear which GSP domain a question relates to?
Absolutely. They will introduce what domain they are moving on to, and they will let you very clearly know how they are expecting you to tailor your answer.
Thank you. And will you be questioned on a global statement? And if so, how?
That's down to each panel. It may just be that they give you an opportunity at the end to surmise, or they may prompt how they want that summation presented. But again, you will be very clear to you the structure of your interview by your lead assessor.
Okay. Can you give an example of what they'll be asking us about in our reflective narrative?
Not without letting you know some of the questions. Again, I would just say, please go back to the domains. Those are the key areas that we need to be satisfied you are competent in and safe and ready to practice by fulfilling the requirements of all of those domains.
Now, I know we've answered this question in the presentations. For anybody who joined us later on and perhaps missed it, can you clarify what are RP1 and RP2?
Well, that's a bit, I might need to go back to the slide, but they are the readiness to practice themes where you show that you are aware of the limitation and scope of your own practice that need to run through every answer and every domain that you respond to.
Okay. Obviously, if you want further information, then please do join us at the Q&A session or go back through the presentation, which will be available after this session and is also available on the website if you're not sure.
We will also be taking the information from these questions and putting up an FAQ for people. Yeah. So if you have seen a question flick past that you wanted to spend more time on, we will devise an FAQ.
Okay, thanks, Nicky. Okay, when will IAC assessors start accessing OneFile prior to marking of the narrative?
Today. As soon as the assessment has begun from midday yesterday. Once the narrative is submitted, the IAC assessment has begun, and there are lots and lots of things going on behind the scenes between now and when you have your interview. So the assessment has already now begun.
Okay. Okay, right. So, okay, I'm switching between two questions. So, do students often fail twice?
I would say no, wouldn't you, Louise? I think
very small proportion go through to their third resit, but
we would hope we've been able to give enough guidance and support throughout the programme that by the time you enter the IAC, you are confident and ready. We are not here to try and trick people. We want to support people to join the workforce, and the support should be made available to everybody to be able to make a good attempt at the IAC.
Thank you. How is feedback from the IAC given? Will this be in written format or face-to-face?
It's written format. You will get feedback from each of the domains covered. It's agreed by the panel and it will be emailed to you with your overall result. That feedback also gets copied to your TO and they can then talk things through with you afterwards, because you've still got time on the programme to complete other competencies.
Okay. My ID is currently in my old name as I recently got married, and this has been upvoted by 9 people. So will this be an issue?
9 have recently got married. Well,
congratulations, everybody.
Do you know, that's one we've never quite come across. Do you have a copy of the marriage certificate that you could scan, or perhaps take this online and email the inbox, and we can work out a way of confirming who you are?
Yeah, I would add to that, just if you have had a change of name or change of contact information recently, please do contact us to let us know, because we will be using that information to communicate with you. So it's important we have the latest information. If you have had a change of name, we can also make sure that the panel are aware of that in advance. So it's best that you let us know, so in case there's any communication issues on the day, we can remove those, hopefully.
Especially if we're thinking much further ahead as well, and in terms of completion and certification, we'll need confirmation of correct names. So.
Absolutely. Okay.
Exceptional circumstances for recording.
Why would we record an interview, Nicky? What circumstances?
So, for example, and I will call on a real life example, we had a panel of 3 assessors, and one assessor was then taken unwell and could not continue. So for the fairness and the equity of the experience of everybody in front of that panel, we continued with 2 assessors, but we recorded those interviews so that they could then be reviewed afterwards by the assessor when they were well enough again to participate.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll take this next question. So I think this is similar to the previous question about employment. So what happens if our retake is after the end of our contract? So you will get your first opportunity, should always be within contract, within your 3-year period of training. You will continue to have access to the IAC, whether you are in your training department or whether you have moved on to a different job or a different place of work. But we will not extend contracts or funding on the basis of exam failure alone. So as we've previously said, there may, and there are for several trainees, circumstances which impact on your ability to complete the programme on time. And we do have the exceptional extenuating circumstances process where you can explain what's happened and we can consider if you're eligible for an extension, which then may cover a second attempt depending on your individual circumstances. But you need to review the exceptional extenuating circumstances policy and make sure that if you have got circumstances that they actually fit under the criteria of that policy if you're going to make an application. So tips on how best to prepare for the interview, Nicky?
I would say relax. I would say don't worry, be calm. You've submitted your narrative. Familiarise yourself with the key points within your narrative. Familiarise yourself with the domains of what the questioning will be. But just relax. These are not trick questions. This is your opportunity to highlight to us your experience and your accumulated knowledge and how you will apply that. So the main thing to do is just relax before you go in.
Easier said than done, we know.
I know, even coming into something like this, it is, but yeah, just none of the assessors are there to trick. They want as much as you do to just make this a productive experience where you can highlight everything that you've covered over the last 3 years.
Can we relate our answers to previous career experiences, such as specialism-related activities that have strengthened our skills knowledge prior to the STP?
Again, as we said in a previous question, quite like this, as long as you can give example and you can show why it's relevant, how it links to your safety and your scope of practice, then you can include it.
Do the assessors tell us if they need more information to pass a certain element?
No, they will not give you any indication throughout your interview whether you have passed or failed, whether you have excelled or not. They may question further, but please don't think that if they question further, that means they weren't satisfied with an answer. It may just be that they're interested to know the next point of that, the next stage of that questioning, but you will not be told whether they think you've passed or failed.
Okay, thanks, Nicky. Will the CBDs be new scenarios or taken from our CBD competencies on one file?
So CBDs have been written by specialty leads and lead station writers, and they have been mapped against the domains. So they are not taken from the competencies, they are taken from the domains that that panel feel that potentially might not be able to cover through other ways within your interview, but that they want to present you with at the end.
Okay. So a question about conflict of interest. So if someone you work with is on your panel, is this considered a conflict of interest?
No, it's not. A conflict of interest really comes down to them being your training officer. Everybody participating on a panel is on a professional register and is under a professional code of conduct and has undergone training within the school to be able to be as objective as possible within this assessment. So as I said earlier, you may go in and there may be a face that's familiar to you. That does not mean there's a declared conflict of interest.
Okay, thank you, Nicky. So last year, trainees received an email regarding CBDs in a folder with their specialism. I haven't received that email.
So those CBDs that were released last year are on the school website. Trainees received the email last year because that was when they went live. They've been there the whole time. We can include the link if people are not able to find it or are not familiar with where it is. So we can correspond and get that link back out. But the formative examples are already on the school website.
Thank you. Hopefully you should be able to find that with the links that are on the school website. Okay, if you have not done very well on your narrative, oh, I've lost that question. Can you put that back, Stuart? There it is. If you have not done very well on your narrative, can you still pass based on your interview if you answer the questions well? Again, I think similar to the question we had previously around, is the narrative assessed in its own right?
Sorry, things are jumping all over the place. The narrative is not assessed independently. The narrative is providing the foundation for the structure of your interview.
Okay. There is a lot of emphasis on self-regulation. Can you explain what this means?
I can, however, I am sure that that is different for each specialty, each different environment, and each workplace that you may well be in. Self-regulation is about being very aware of the limitations of your practice. It's about knowing very, very much the scope of safety and knowing where you should stop in order to be safe, not just for yourself, but for those people you work with and those people that you are serving. There is detail on the internet, on our website, about self-regulation and about scope of practice. And again, if that's helpful, we can put links to that in the FAQs for later. But it's very, very much about being aware of your own limitations within practice.
Okay. Interesting question. How is inclusivity being accounted for with our assessment panel?
That's quite a broad question, and I don't quite know what they are trying to ask. But what we do is we have a huge mapping process behind the scenes in terms of your panel. We try to have a mix of gender, experience, ethnicity. We have a big criteria for mapping. I hope that's what people were aiming for.
Yeah, okay. Okay, can we mention examples from our career experience that we have not put in the narrative for example, an experience with a patient?
Yeah, as long as it can be evidenced and it's truly relevant. If you feel that it's an appropriate response to the questioning, you can go ahead.
And when will we find out who is on our interview panel?
When you enter the room. We do not tell you in advance who your panel are. Yeah, so when you enter the room, that's when you will meet your assessors. They will introduce themselves and put you at ease.
Yeah, okay. Will we be aware beforehand if our assessment is being recorded or we are selected for random observation?
You will be made aware beforehand if it's being recorded, because we will inform you and ask consent. For random observation, you won't be aware beforehand, and you will not be aware of anybody being there. It'll just be an extra group of initials. The observations are for quality assurance. It's for us to ensure that everybody is having a fair and equitable experience within their interview. And the observations are performed by trained, experienced people who are service users who participate and have built up a lot of experience, not just with ours, but with other kinds of assessment throughout their healthcare environments. So.
Okay. Will the questions be asked in order of domains listed in the reflective narrative?
Not necessarily. That is up to the individual panel, but as we've already said, they will tell you what domain they are then intending to question you on.
Okay. The IACC assessment changed to a different date very recently. What if there are issues with the new date?
7 people asking that. We're not aware of dates changing very recently. At the moment, we are still compiling panels, and as I'm sure you can imagine, mapping panels and assessors, particularly taking into account terms conflicts of interest, is really complex. So there would need to be a good reason for having changed an IACC exam. One thing I will say is that your IACC assessment is not just the day and the hour of your interview. That 2-week window is the IACC assessment. If for any reason your assessment could not take place, there was a power cut or an election, we have to reschedule your assessment at any point, then we would anticipate you being available within those 2 weeks. But that would be done very, very much in conversation with you.
Yeah. And just to add that we make every effort working with our clinical colleagues to ensure that we organise the panels for the dates that are advertised. But in the very rare instance where there is a clinical urgent reason for us to move that to support your panel members who are obviously clinicians, then we will aim to do that, but without disrupting the timeline, which means you will still be able to participate in your assessment and you receive your results in the same timeline as the rest of your peers. So we are doing everything that we can to make sure it still happens within that timeline, but we're also having to take account of very urgent and short notice clinical pressures that have arisen that were unforeseen when we published the timeline. So do bear with us if that affects you. We believe it only affects a very small proportion of trainees. So the majority of you will be going ahead as planned.
And that is exactly what's happened this time around for the people impacted.
Yeah. If we fail the IACC, is it the written component or interview component that would be resat?
That depends on what you have failed. If you have, there's a criteria of failing that may result in either a full resit or a light touch resit. So if you have only failed a couple of domains, you may be eligible for a light touch resit. If you have a light touch resit, you do not have to resubmit your full critical reflective narrative, just the domains you have failed. If you are doing a full resit, it's a whole new assessment and you start again and you do submit another narrative. All of that will be corresponded and explained in great detail to people who are eligible for a resit. It's everybody's outcomes are individual.
Thank you, Nikki. Okay, how in-depth are the questions about the narrative? Do trainees need to revise all the data and details for the cited competencies?
Again, it's up to the specialty and the panel, I think. Some specialties probably lead themselves to be more data focused than others. I would say be aware of everything you have referenced in your narrative, but they will not be going into minutiae detail about things. This is about the domains, not the detail of your knowledge in terms of data. If that.
Yeah. I think you should just make sure you are knowledgeable about the evidence that you've cited and be prepared to ask questions that relate to it, really. Okay, I've been offered a new job after the STP. Congratulations. When should I say my last, I'm assuming, date is? Do all our contracts end on the 16th of September or 3 years from the date we started? So the date of completion for the STP is to accommodate as many different contract end dates as possible. You won't all have started on exactly the same day. The variability comes as part of the employment checks that are done when you started. So some of you may have started, some even as early as the end of August, some may have started much later in September. As long as it's within that kind of month window. The completion deadline is set usually for the third Monday of the month, and that is to accommodate as many as those kind of variabilities in terms of completion timelines as possible. So by the time you've got to kind of the third week in September, we would have expected you to start kind of 3 years earlier. So that's why that's the date. If you have a new job, it depends on when you start that new job. So if you're starting kind of anytime now, we have a policy which enables you to transfer your training to your new employer up to the completion deadline, and that's the transfer policy which is on the school's website. If you're going to have a job that is around the time of the end of the STP, then you don't need to transfer. But obviously, if your contact information changes, then we do need to know so that we can make sure we can keep in contact with you about your completion certificate so that we can then send the data on to HCPC for you to register kind of end of September, October time. So hopefully that's answered that question. What is a reason for appealing, Nikki?
The reason for appealing is an issue of process. You cannot appeal on an outcome or on an academic judgment. It is if you feel that there was an issue with the process of your assessment that impacted on the outcome and your performance during the interview. But there is a policy, and it is referenced in the slides. It's very clearly stated what does and doesn't qualify for the criteria, but you cannot appeal just because you failed. There has to be an incident or a reason that you feel it was not a fair assessment of at the time based on process.
Thank you. Okay, a question about location. Can we be at home for the interview, or does it have to be
at home?
At work?
You can be at home. You don't have to be at work. We just ask that you're somewhere where you feel comfortable and which is quiet, enabling you to focus, where you won't be interrupted, and where you won't be able to access any other material.
Yeah. And obviously, wherever you choose to undertake the assessment, make sure you've got a consistent and reliable internet connection so that it doesn't hopefully interfere with the interview as far as possible. Although, you know, these things are unpredictable, hopefully not. But yeah, please make sure that you are in a place that meets the criteria in terms of not being interrupted, and that you can make sure that you can attend for the full duration of the interview. Will we still get feedback if we pass, or is this just if we fail?
No, you'll get feedback if you pass. Every trainee undertaking the IACC will get all of their feedback, the details of which are confirmed and approved by the exam board.
Thank you. And when can we expect to hear back about reasonable adjustments?
That's an independent process carried out by an independent committee. That meeting has taken place, and I understand the outcomes that are being corresponded now. If you haven't heard about an application you submitted by the end of the week, please contact us via the inbox, because it may be that we are trying to contact you to gain further evidence or information.
Thank you. Is the specialist module content only assessed by the CBDs?
No, it depends whether you've referred to anything specialist in your narrative. I don't quite know what they mean.
I mean, I would suggest that you can expect to be assessed on your specialist modules. So it won't necessarily just be covered by the CBDs.
Yeah,
it will be throughout the interview. Okay. If our training officer has changed at any point, is that something we need to inform the school about? Absolutely. If you have a change of training officer, we do have a change notification process that is managed through the school's accreditation team. And that is because we need to know if there are any changes in staffing that impact on the support that you have available for your training. You can also email the general inbox to let us know. And it is really important if your training officer has changed, because we do regularly communicate with training officers, that we are made aware so that we can update our records as well. So the answer is yes, please let us know. If we fail, can we delay the resit until summer 2025, or do we have to try again in the winter 2024 window?
That's sort of a bit of both of us, isn't it, Louise? Really?
Yeah. I mean, you can't defer the assessment unless you have exceptional extenuating circumstances that fit under the EEC policy. Otherwise, yes, we would expect you to attempt the next assessment at the next available opportunity. Can I let the panel know that I have communication difficulties without applying for adjustments?
You can. I would say if you have communication difficulties, that should be a reasonable adjustment application. Whether there's anything you actually want changed for the conduct of the assessment or not, it should be recorded. Again, there will be an introductory time at the beginning of the interview, and that would be an opportunity for you to inform the lead assessor of anything you think might impact on your communication. But I would advise that you inform us in advance as well, in case there's something that we need to mitigate for you.
Okay, thank you. So you mentioned that if you fail, you resit in the next block. When is that likely to be?
It's the first week of November in the winter.
Yeah. So the dates for the winter IACC are all on the school's website. So there's critical reflective narrative deadline date, as well as the interview window date as well. So please do check. Oh, I think, did I miss another question?
I was ready. Yeah, I was ready to answer one and it went. I can't remember what it was though.
You had already answered it, Nicky.
Oh, so thanks.
It was
Thank
a
you,
duplicate.
Stuart. Okay, final question then, it seems. So do we have to disclose a fail or a resit? I'm not sure in what context we've got that question. Maybe you want to add to that question perhaps so that we can respond. If you're talking about to a new employer, you will have to potentially tell them that you are still to complete a training programme that will enable you to then register with the Health and Care Professions Council. It's important that employers, if that's a condition of your employment, that they be made aware of where you are at on that programme prior to you accepting that job. I don't know if that's answered your question. Please do add another if we haven't. So we'll give it another minute or so to see if any more questions come in, or have we answered everybody?
Louise, I've now closed the questions.
Okay.
Any that we haven't made public here are either duplicates or they're very specific to individuals. And
okay.
If there's anybody in that situation, maybe I can speak on your behalf, Louise. I think the best bet is to send an email to the inbox. The questions were starting to become duplicates or individual, so they have been closed.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for managing that for us, Stuart, and thank you to everybody for your questions. It's really interesting to understand kind of the areas where you are seeking further information, and we will take those questions away and see if we can pull together some FAQs for any colleagues who haven't been able to join us today. As we have said, we do have a drop-in session, which I'll plug again for next week, which is the 19th at 12 o'clock, I believe. So please, if there's something we've not answered today, or if you've got a colleague who's not been able to attend that's got some questions, do come and join us. It will be an open session. So if you have any sensitivities around the questions that you're asking for your personal circumstances, then as Stuart has suggested, do drop us an email and we'll see how we can help you. Otherwise, I hope you have found today's session helpful. Thank you again to Nicky for taking us through the detail of the assessment. I would like to take this opportunity to wish you all the best for your forthcoming interviews. I hope it's a positive experience for you all, and that we will obviously be in contact following that assessment with your results. So best of luck, everybody, and we hope to speak to you soon.